The Faceless Ones says goodbye to Ben and Polly in a body snatchers-esque story set at Gatwick Airport. Sadly, 4 of the 6 episodes are missing from the BBC's archive, but it was animated in 2020. Join me in my journey of revisiting Doctor Who's missing episode range as we look back and reflect on the Faceless Ones. The Doctor, Polly, Ben, and Jamie land at Gatwick Airport. As they run around the airport, they stumble upon a mysterious airline company called Chameleon Tours. The company promises inexpensive flights to Europe, yet when the planes land, no passengers arrive. Who is really behind Chameleon Tours? And why is Polly acting so strangely? This animation was directed by Anne-Marie Walsh, who had worked on The Power of the Daleks, Sharda, and the Macroterra animations. This was the first ever animation to animate surviving episodes, which may seem like a crazy idea at first, but the team did this so that the entire story could be watched as an animation to appeal to audiences who don't enjoy 4:3 black and white television. For this review, I've watched the entire 16:9 colour animation, since the point of this series is to review the animations first and the story second. My personal opinion on this is that I think we're really lucky to get multiple choices on how to view these episodes, and nothing is taken away from us by them doing it this way. Straight off the bat, any animation that followed the Macroterra had a tough battle. Macro's character animation, in my opinion, is one of the smoothest and most successful of the entire range. So when I found out that Sun and Moon, who did the character animation for Macro, weren't returning for this release, I was very disappointed. Immediately in this animation, the character movement is far less expressive and sometimes really flat. It's not bad animation, don't get me wrong, but it's just not the high standard that was set in the previous release. The character artwork is done by the same artist, Martin Garrity, from the previous release. Most of it is really great, especially the background extras who've been given really groovy 60s outfits that I just love. But the Doctor is weirdly done in this one. In some angles, he has like a really bulbous head, and it's a bit distracting. Like, I know this guy's smart, but this is ridiculous. The Chameleons, the villains of the story, have been given a complete redesign to their original on-screen counterparts. The Faceless Ones have been given faces, which is absolutely insane. I understand from an animation perspective why this was done, even if narratively it doesn't really work well. Most of these animations, all emotions and expressions are done through the face. So if you remove the eyes, mouths, etc., you can't really make these creatures look like they move at all. In film, acting with a mask is an art form. But in animation, you can't really translate that as well. Ultimately, the redesign, I think, is a massive downgrade. And I just don't think they look creepy at all. I'm not sure if it's the color choices that make it not work for me. The yellow jumpsuits feel a bit comic book, because the character of the Chameleons in this story have their appearance almost melted. And I think that's what they've tried to achieve here. And the patches on the skin might be a bit more frightening if it was more flesh toned and felt like it was more like crusted blood. That would be really gross. But maybe that's a step too far for Doctor Who, I don't know. The story choice also made this a difficult serial to animate. It's an airport that's mainly grey walls, which isn't the most vibrant setting for an animation. It's difficult to make contemporary Earth look stylized. The far-out planet surface of Vulcan is a lot easier to expand and add more production value to, rather than a boring airport with white walls. All this exciting location work that looks great on film doesn't necessarily have the same expensive look, because any location can be animated. They're not restricted by location permits. The lighting and composition once again is really well done. The warm glow of lamps and light fixtures just add a real nice look to the piece, especially in these boring sets. I do admire that they tried to replicate the original sets so they would match the surviving episodes. One thing I found really funny is that the Chameleons' control devices that they mount to their arms look exactly like a Nintendo Wii remote, which is just so silly. There are a lot of Easter eggs in this production, little references to things in the future and the past, which I'm not really a big fan of. I don't hate them, it's fine that they're there, but I don't really get any joy out of them. Like seeing a wanted poster for the Master is just like nothing to me. But maybe I just hate fun. Maybe I don't like having a good time. But there is one Easter egg that I did like, was that with the newspapers, they all have headlines about the war machines, which just makes sense. Because the Faceless ones takes place on the exact same date as the war machines. So of course the war machines would be in the papers. I think it's stuff like that which interests me more than putting pictures of future characters in older stories. Whereas this makes sense within the narrative, within the story of the show. One of my favourite telesnaps from the story is one of Polly in the box. It's so terrifying. Yet in the animation, it's just so flat and neutral. Everyone is just so rigid in this animation, barely moving, just shifting side to side. The only time where there's more fluidity is when they're recreating scenes that survive already, like in the cliffhanger to episode 2, and Pat's movement is really great. It just shows that they can do it, they just probably weren't given the time. But I am happy with the recreation of the photo booth telesnap also, it's one of my favourites. There's just a few little choices that I'm not a huge fan of. The inspector with his pipe that he never once smokes out of, the inconsistent line work in the air traffic control room, and yet another foot appearance? This is the third time that I've had to look at a random foot that is out for no reason. Even Tarantino would blush at this. There is an agenda, a foot gender. Not to kink shame, it's fine. But baby, you're at work. It's not time to draw your little feet and put them on a professional product. And I just have to say again, to reiterate, put them dogs away. Time and a place. Time and a place. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's talk about the story. I'm going to get it out of the way first. I'm not a huge fan of the Faceless ones. I think it's overly long and its concept doesn't really require 6 episodes to tell its story. But there are a lot of elements to this production that I really do like. But the biggest issue with this story is the characterization of the Chameleons. Their plan is very simple. They abduct humans, they shrink them, and steal their likenesses. Yet the writer seems to forget their plan at every point. Why does Polly pretend to be someone else? What do the Chameleons get out of that? Why don't they just take her straight up to the airplane and send her up? Why does she work the desk? All it does is rope the Doctor further into their plans, which should have been the opposite of their intentions. Especially since every other chameleon, when they assimilate a body, they assume their identity also. There's a whole scene where a chameleon explains the original person's name and address. It's a major part of the chameleon's character that they assimilate and replicate not only their form, but their minds. And you can tell that the writer quickly discovered that Polly's narrative is odd, and they just chuck her straight onto the plane and her storyline is dropped like that. It goes nowhere. Surely it would make more sense for the chameleon to assume her identity, to keep an eye on the Doctor and spy on him. Later on, a chameleon takes the form of Jamie and for some reason decides to use an English accent rather than the Scottish for no apparent reason. The rules of the Chameleons just don't make any sense and just can be switched at any point for no rhyme or reason. Maybe this is the reason why they never became an iconic villain in Doctor Who's pantheon. The shape-shifting Zygons took their place, who have a much stricter rules and, in my opinion, a far better design and story. And also, what came first? Chameleon Tours or the Chameleons? Did they invent the company? Did they invent the spaceships that look like airplanes? Okay, now I'm probably just being pedantic. The truth of the matter is, these stories were not meant to be analysed this deeply. They were meant to be screened once and then junked. The story has all the right ingredients. It's just a bit overcooked. Shape-shifting body snatchers running around Gatwick Airport? A wonderful idea. Polly being taken over, Samantha's brother going missing, an airplane that can fly in space, all brilliant ideas. Just the execution isn't exactly up to scratch. This story is also the final appearance of Ben and Polly, who depart at the end of episode 6. They don't get a massive heroic end, they simply realise they're back in their own time and can now go home, which they choose to do. Although it's not the most exciting end to their characters, the scene is really nicely written, and I think it's a nice exit for the pair. It's still a lot better than what poor Dodo got during the War Machines. In this story, we also meet a potential replacement companion in the form of Samantha Briggs, played by Pauline Collins. Collins was offered to stay on as a series regular, but turned it down. She would later return to the Hooniverse as Queen Victoria in Tooth and Claw. I really enjoy her character. I think she's fun and likes a good argument, and I think she would have given the Doctor a good telling off when needed, which could have been a fun dynamic in the TARDIS. Given how differently Victoria is written to Samantha, it's hard to imagine how future Victoria stories would have worked with Samantha in her place. Her romantic relationship with Jamie is an interesting one, and I just don't really fully believe in their chemistry, but that could also be a fault of the animation rather than the actual performance of the actors. I think that the character animation doesn't accurately portray her frustration at the Chameleon tour's desk, and the flirting scenes just feel like their mouths are moving, but there's no emotion behind it. Her performance just isn't given the attention I think it deserves. Her brother going missing via Chameleon tours really grounds the story, and her disguising her sadness is a great choice, although the animation doesn't really show it that well. Also, they didn't animate her fabulous hat, which is a crime within itself. Sack Anne-Marie Walsh. Just kidding. Even though having the Doctor, Jamie and Samantha given a death by a laser scene is ridiculous, it's nice to see Samantha's makeup mirror used to deflect the laser. And it makes it the second time this season a makeup bag has solved the day after the Moonbase using nail polish remover against the Cybermen. It's very girl power and I love it. I think episode 6 is the one I'd like to see return to the BBC's archive the most. Seeing the location footage, the spaceship sets in motion, and most importantly, Ben and Polly's departure scene. The fight scene in the parking lot is really rough in animation. They just haven't got the range to make those movements feel natural. It's just a bunch of awkward grabbing in 2D. It's a really tough watch. Plus, there's like a hard cut end of the music track at the end of the fight scene, and it's just so rough, and I just laughed. But I do admire this story for taking its time with its conclusion, which takes up the majority of episode 6. The Doctor works to turn the Chameleons against each other. The airport's crew rush to find the Chameleon bodies is high stress. It's a really solid episode, and I think it's the best of the bunch. I also like the Doctor offering to help the Chameleons with their problem, even after all the damage they did. It just shows the kindness of the character. The Faceless Ones, although not my favourite story, is definitely worth a watch. If you look at the story too hard, it falls apart pretty fast, but on its surface, there is so much to like about it. I can see why so many people love this story. I think that ultimately, the story lacks enough incident to warrant its 6 parts, but the vibes and performances are there. So, what did you think of the Faceless Ones animation? Let me know in the comment section below. Okay, I'll stop saying okay. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Josh Nez YouTube channel.